My friends, welcome back to another episode of the Daily Dose. We are hitting you with day number 255 today. 255. We are going to be looking at Mark 11 and 12 today. We also have Psalm 100 on the menu. So let's jump in and see what we are looking at. We've got quite a bit to cover, and I'm probably going to run over my normal 10-minute mark that I try to aim for, but hey, we'll see how it goes. So at the beginning of today's scripture, right at the front of chapter 11, we talk about Jesus coming to Jerusalem as the king, right? That's kind of the topic of what's about to happen. So it says, as they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethpage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two of his disciples, saying to them, Go to the village ahead of you, and just as you enter it, you're going to find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, hey, what are you doing? Say, the Lord needs it, and we'll send it back here shortly. Wouldn't that be cool if we could do that? Like if there was something that we needed and we could just go up to a person and be like, hey, yo, the Lord needs that, right? Like, this is a facetious example, but like, hey, I need to get somewhere fast and I'm waiting for the bus and I'm going to be late. I'm not going to make it to church, right? So I happen to be standing at a bus stop in Alpharetta, Georgia, next to a Ferrari dealership, right? And so in order for me to not be late for church, I can go into the Ferrari dealership and just grab keys from behind the counter and jump in a Ferrari. And if somebody says, hey, where are you going with this Ferrari? Say, hey, the Lord needs it. I got to get to church. I'm preaching today and I'm going to be late, right? I'll bring it back. And then they're like, yeah, okay, go ahead. That's cool. Whatever. Can you imagine? Right? Anyways, so that's exactly what they do. They do what Jesus said. What would you do, right? If you were hanging out with Jesus and he was like, look, see that village up there? Go in, go grab someone else's private property and bring it here. And if they say anything, just tell them, yo, the Lord needs it, right? Would you be uncomfortable doing that? I'd like to think I would be, right? I'd like to think that I would be relatively uncomfortable doing that. And I wonder how the colt ended up getting back there, right? Did the disciples just casually walk it back later on? Or did it kind of run back home on its own? I don't know. Interesting to think about, though. Then we go on to a section about Jesus cursing a fig tree. We've talked about Jesus cursing a fig tree back in Matthew. We talked in great detail about that, so we're not going to talk about this. Then we get to a section where Jesus clears the temple courts. Here's what it says. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, Is it not written, My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers? Okay. Some people refer to this as the Temple Tantrum, right? A play on words. We all know what a temper tantrum is, okay? When a child doesn't get their way and they freak out and just have a total meltdown and just go crazy with anger or with tears or with whatever, right? I have a problem when people call this a temple tantrum, okay? Because it's equating Jesus' behavior with that of a toddler. And I don't think that that is appropriate at all. I think that it's kind of offensive. That's just my personal opinion. I just don't think it's appropriate to associate Jesus' behavior with a quote-unquote tantrum, right? What Jesus is doing is coming from a place of righteous anger and judgment. So I'll just leave that there. Now, what I will say is that I think one of the reasons Jesus was angry is because the people that were there were not just there simply doing their job. I believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we read about money changers. I think that there was a certain type of coinage or money that was used at the temple, and that when you came there with other types or forms of currency, that you had to change it for this temple type of currency, right? So what people would do is they would come in, they would try to convert their currency over, and I think that the money changers would charge them like drastically high rates of exchange. So if they were trying to exchange something for something, the money changer would be like, okay, well, it would be this much, but I'm going to add on like a 20% fee for the, you know what I mean? There was some sort of greed and manipulation going on there, right? With the money changing. Also, when people would come to the temple, they would come and sacrifice. And if people were coming from far away, they may not be able to bring enough living animals with them to sacrifice if they had a long journey. Or if people were poor, they may not have been able to afford to bring anything with them, right? Maybe they didn't have any animals or pigeons or doves or whatever it was they were going to use for a sacrifice. So people could come, they could change their money, and they could purchase doves, for example, to be used as sacrifices. But I have read and heard that the prices were astronomical. The prices that were charged were totally astronomical to get these animals to sacrifice because the people were taking advantage of the buyers. The sellers were taking advantage of the fact that someone was coming to honor God and to obey God's commands, and they were trying to make a profit off of that. So it became an issue. Then let's see, what else do we look at? We look at the authority of Jesus being questioned. We covered that in Matthew. The parable of the tenants. Then we go on to the scene where they're talking about paying the imperial tax to Caesar. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give what to God is God's. We've gone over that in Matthew. And then there's a section that talks about marriage at the resurrection. Why is this brought up? Okay, the Sadducees bring this up, and that is because the Sadducees did not believe in a bodily resurrection. The Pharisees and the Sadducees were both religious groups. They were kind of butting heads with each other, kind of like the Sunnis and the Shiites within the Islam community. The Pharisees and the Sadducees were both groups that spawned from Judaism, but they had differences in their views and their beliefs. Okay, and one of the differences is that the Sadducees did not believe in a physical bodily resurrection. And because they didn't believe in that, sorry, just 1 second. The dishwasher's beeping, and I'm going to go turn it off. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry, I'm back. That took a minute, and I almost forgot where I was. All right, so we were talking about the Sadducees. They did not believe in a physical resurrection. And so to try to prove their point of how ridiculous a physical resurrection would be in their eyes, they said, okay, well, look, let's play this out. Let's see where it goes, okay? How does marriage work in the resurrection, right? Let's just say a guy's married to a woman. They have kids, and he dies, right? Okay, well, then the woman remarries. He dies after they have some kids. And so this keeps happening, right? It's this story of a woman marrying a guy, has kids, and then the guy dies somehow, right? So by the time this lady is in her old age, getting ready to die, she's had, 7 husbands or whatever. She's had kids with each of the husbands, right? So when she dies and makes it to heaven, assuming that all of the husbands are there, whose wife will she be? Who's she going to be married to? She can't be married to all 7 of them, right? So that's kind of what they're getting at. It seems like they're trying to put forth a ludicrous example to prove that, resurrection doesn't make sense, right? But what's interesting is that Jesus shoots him down, and he says, your problem is not that you think she'll have too many husbands. Your problem is that you don't understand the scriptures, right? Jesus says that in the afterlife, in heaven, people will neither be married nor will they be given in marriage. Marriage won't be a thing because you, the church, will be the bride of Christ, right? So that's interesting. We come to learn that our marriages will basically not be in effect in heaven, right? And when we make our vows, right, it's until death do us part. So does death cancel a marriage obligation? It seems like it does, right? And it seems from other things that we read that people are not going to be married in heaven. So anyways, from there we go on to look at the greatest commandment, right? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Then, the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. So it appears that those 2 things would sum up all of the other commandments in 2 things, right? When it comes to God, love God, honor God, do all the things that you're supposed to God and for God. And then for people, love people like you love yourself. If you do that, you will, in effect, be obeying all of the other commands. Then it talks about whose son is the Messiah. Then we get into a warning about teachers of the law. And then the last thing that I want to cover today is the widow's offering, okay? And here, in verse 41, Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a few cents. Okay, so here you've got these rich people coming by, dropping fat stacks. You've got this poor widow who just drops a couple of pennies, basically, right? So Jesus calls his disciples and he says, "Truly, I tell you, this poor widow put more into the treasury than all the others. They gave out of their wealth, but she gave out of her poverty, putting in everything, all she had to live on." Right? So what the widow did, Jesus is looking at it proportionally, right? How much did she have? A couple of copper coins. How much did she give? A couple of copper coins. She gave everything, right? So then this other person that, just for making the math easy, let's just say this other person dropped in $10,000. Okay, well, the question isn't so much how much did that person put in. The question is, how much did that person have left over after they put that in, right? If that person dropped in $10,000, but they've got $5 million in their bank account, that $10,000 wasn't really very much at all. If that person put in $10,000, but all they had was $10,000, then, yeah, what they gave is equivalent to what the woman gave. So here Jesus is in my eyes, teaching, look, it's not so much about what you give as it is about how much you have left after you give. Kind of makes sense? Anyways, that's all I got. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your time. Appreciate you. And until we meet again, friends, deuces.